Oh, well. So we are just one day before the Indian T20 League begins. And finally, the three musketeers have combined to discuss the last two teams, who also happen to be the two teams that will be playing the game tomorrow. Of course, we're talking about Chennai and Gujarat. Up till now, Dan, Gurkirat, and myself, we have reviewed all the other eight teams. Those clips are out on Chennai and Gujarat. Just feel free to ask us. So, without further ado, let me welcome Dan and Gurkirat. How are you guys?
Yeah, very well, Somesh. How are you?
All well, all well.
Yeah, I'm good as well. I've just somehow managed to join in for the show today. So there's that. And yeah, looking forward to this last series of previews so that from tomorrow the real action can actually begin. And we have some real scenarios to discuss rather than discussing the possible scenarios, because yeah, some that is also going to leave us stunned. I do suppose that there are going to be performances which will leave us stunned, so looking forward to those performances very soon now.
Yep. Okay, so which team we should start with, gents? Gujarat or Chennai?
Let's just, given it's going to be MS Dhoni's last season in all probability, let's just make it the last team to be analyzed, and let's just start with Gujarat.
Okay, I've been hearing that for 3 years now, so I won't put my money on this being his last season. But let's start with Gujarat. Dan, have they? What were the goals? What were the gaps that they had after last season? Of course, they won, so people might say that they had no gaps. But whatever they had, I mean, were they able to plug those in during the auction?
Okay, so this is a fairly controversial take in my view, but I'm going to go with it, and I'm doubling down because I've said this before. I don't actually believe that they were the strongest team in the tournament last year, and I don't think they were actually even close to being the strongest team in the tournament last year. Their net boundary percentage was negative, which is unheard of for a team to win the tournament with a negative net boundary percentage. And they basically won so many clutch moments in matches. Everything that was the finest of margins, Twatia with 2 sixes after Odeon Smith's overthrow, being just one example. And there was plenty of others as well. Every kind of fine margin went their way. And for me, that is impossible to sustain in the long term. And that for me is going to be a bit of mean reversion, I think, this year for Gujarat. In terms of the holes that they needed to improve their boundary hitting, and I'm not sure that the addition of Kane Williamson is going to do that. In theory, that they could structure up to be fairly bowling strong, but they overseas pacer Josh Little's been injured, missed the PSL, so maybe it will be Alzari Joseph who comes in for him. They could also structure up a bit differently and play a domestic pacer such as Shivam Mavi, and then play David Miller as an overseas player. But look, Miller's reputation is a big hitter, but actually he's a player who likes to take his time to get going first before he hits. So again, this is another player who's very capable of these 20 off 20s and 25 off 25s, those type of innings. And I think that I look at this team and I think that they've got 5 or 6 players who are all capable of those type of innings. And I just wonder where these high strike rate innings are going to come from. Hardik is going to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting in that respect, but he's got the responsibility of being captain, which makes it tricky from his perspective. And I don't think it's reasonable in the slightest to expect Twatia to do the same thing this year as he did last year. So for me, a lot of question marks. As I say, mean reversion is something that I really expect for this team, and for me, I think they've got a lot of holes, particularly in their batting group.
Gurkirat, do you echo those thoughts?
I do to some extent, wherein I don't think that they are going to be as lucky as what they were last time. And before people take offense on this, I just want to mention that Hardik himself had mentioned that they were quite lucky. What I do think is that they had Rashid Khan coming in at 7 with I think Tewatia at 6, Miller at 5, and Hardik at 4. In my view, they certainly need another batter. Rashid Khan at number 7 is a spot too high. He's a very good number 8, probably an above average number 8. But I think at number 7, it's a little too much. You probably need a proper batter there sometimes, because not every time it is going to happen that you will not have a collapse. Because last season, what one other thing that rarely happened with Gujarat was that they hardly collapsed. There was hardly no collapse that happened with that team. So I do think that they probably need an extra batter over there. And for me, the concern is going to be uh, if they in terms of overseas players, especially, like, do they go for reputations over performances? Because they bought Kane Williamson, and at the auction they said that Kane Williamson will start. Now, to me, that's not a great move. I'd rather have Matthew Wade play at number 3 or even at number 5 over Kane Williamson. And even if I want to play an Indian batter, I can then maybe add another overseas pacer. So I really don't want them to start with Kane Williamson. Another thing, like, how Dan was mentioning, a lot of things came together for them. Would be Now Riddhiman Saha was able to do the role of a power play enforcer quite well for them. And this is something that we don't say often in T20s, but he was timing his dismissals to perfection. As soon as the seventh over was there, or the eighth over was there, he was finding a way to get out, because he knew his job was done. In one of the games where he knew that conditions were a little difficult and now was the time for a launch pad, he probably had a 21 ball 25, and then he dismissed himself. So he was very, very good in terms of finding an exit point for himself. Not sure if someone like Riddhiman Saha can also replicate the kind of season that he had last time. Yeah.
Yep. So I think, in my opinion, one of the most underrated aspects of Gujarat's title season last year was the way Miller batted, and especially against spin. I mean, his game. There were question marks around his ability to do that, but he proved everyone wrong. And his game against spin has gone strength to strength since then. At least that's what the numbers suggest. Uh, Regarding Kane Williamson, I tend to agree. I mean, it is a baffling addition in the first place. Uh, Kane himself would be very happy that he finally gets to be teamed up with Rashid again after what Hyderabad did to him. But other than that, I mean, adding Kane to the 11 would be. I mean, I don't see any reasonable explanation for doing that. That what would that also mean would be that they will have to resort to either Saha or KS Bharat as their wicket keeping option, because then they can't have Wade in the 11, which again, uh, just to include Williamson in the 11, they'll have to fill two spots, which could have been filled by two other batters with a higher ceiling. Yeah. So I think what we should do next is have a look at Dan's 11, and then maybe, as always, there will be avenue for us brainstorming and arriving at an ideal 11 with three people agree on. Yep. So Avnish, if you can put that graphic on. Okay, while we wait for it, Dan, if you can just walk us through your 11. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So you talk about getting Wade and Williamson in the same team being difficult, and actually I kind of did it with this 11, but I accept that there is so many permutations of of this team that could be. We can definitely debate over the next few minutes is the overseas combos in particular. So I actually went Shubman Gill, Matthew Wade, Kane Williamson, Abhinav Manohar, David Miller, Hardik Pandya, who may well higher up the order in this 11. Rahul Tewatia, Rashid Khan, Saiki Shaw, Mohammed Shami, and Shivan Mavi. Now, I definitely accept that there is a different way to structure up with this 11. You would potentially use Riddiman Saha or KS Barat as a domestic keeper over Matthew Wade, and then you could go with an overseas pacer, for example, Alzari Joseph, potentially. That would be one way of doing it, and there's probably a way of structuring up the 11 with Vijay Shankar in the team as well. So a couple of options there.
Have at present 3 overseas in the 11, right?
Williamson, Miller, Rashid Khan.
Yeah, 3. So my 11 would be slightly different. I definitely have Matthew Wade at 3 in place of Kane Williamson. I am completely on board with Abhinav Manohar being at 4. I do think that Gujarat didn't really utilize him as well as they could have last season, because I think he has no business batting below Hardik. He should be batting ahead of Hardik and take the role of a spin basher, because he's done that at the lower domestic levels. And then at 5, at 5, 6, 7 for me are 7 is more of Rahul Tewatia. 5 and 6 are Hardik and Miller. It could depend upon what the entry points are and what kind of bowling is being bowled at that point of time. 8 Rashid. 9, I completely agree, is Sai Kishore. 10 Mohammad Shami. For me, 11 is Alzari Joseph. I really think that he needs to play, because Mohammad Shami's death bowling is not a lock. Sometimes he could really go for a lot of runs. But yeah, this is the 11 that I see, with impact players being someone like a Darshan Nalkande, who's done with the ball, who's done decently with the ball. And like you mentioned, another option which could be is that instead of having Riddhiman Saha as an opener, they could have Sai Sudarshan. Instead of maybe having someone like an Abhinav Manohar, they could even play. They could even play Vijay Shankar. They have enough options, and I'd like to see, even though this player didn't really get a lot of chances for them last time, I want to see Noor Ahmed, get a game or two somewhere, if say Gujarat have already qualified or if they are out of the race, because I do believe he's someone who can, who can really set the stage on fire, and he has the surprise factor against teams, or probably if you're playing on a venue like, if you're playing at a venue like Chepauk, where you know that the ball is going to spin. Not the worst idea to play him instead of someone like an Alzari Joseph. So Noor Ahmed is one player I really look forward to, and then, since we were talking about all rounders, there's also Jayant Yadav in the mix, who could also come in as an impact player against your left-handed heavy lineup, and bowl those couple of overs like he was doing for Mumbai whenever they were playing against someone like Delhi. So no dearth of options. I just feel that a lot is going to come down to how they fit in one of Wade or Williamson, and the other is how much does Hardik take upon himself, because a trend that I have seen with Hardik is that he sometimes wants to do everything. He wants to bowl in the power play, he wants to bowl at the death, he wants to anchor, he wants to finish. You can't do that. It's impossible to do that in such a short format, and you, as a captain, you also have to realize that what are your limitations. Sometimes I feel that Hardik just wants too much out of Hardik the player, which I don't think is sustainable.
Yep, I think a few thoughts there, and my question is to Dan. Dan, do you feel you have Williamson in your 11, but do you feel replacing it with someone like a Sai Sudarshan, you're not losing a lot on batting? Whereas if you replace Shivam Mavi with an Alzari Joseph, it really adds an impetus to their bowling, because Alzari Joseph was their best dead bowler last season. along with Yash Dayal.
I agree with you, Somesh. When I pick the 11, it's not necessarily that I value these certain players. There's definitely an element of what I think they're going to do in this situation as well. And I think that they've been quoted as saying that they're going to play Kane Williamson at 3. So obviously that was part of my rationale with this. Now I completely agree with you, and I've written about this a number of times before in terms of the lack of utility of an overseas anchor batter, because you can find numerous players in the domestic market who can do 90 or 95% of the same level for no money and not wasting an overseas slot. So for me, it's a great point that you make about using a Sai Sudarshan instead of Williamson, and then going with an overseas pacer. It makes a lot of sense to me.
Who's the one player that you guys think is the most indispensable to their 11? For me, it's someone like David Miller, because I feel he's really the bridge between the top order and the finishers more than Hardik, because I really feel that with the improvement that he's done in his spin game, he's probably their most complete batter. Hardik has his struggles against short of length pace bowling, and even against away going spin, but I think Miller has probably become their most uh, their most complete batter. Uh, Probably the second best being Shubman Gill. So for me, someone like David Miller is extremely important for them, and I don't think they have a replacement for him, because you might try and fit Matthew Wade at 5-6 with probably Kane Williamson at 3 if Miller gets injured. But I don't think that Matthew Wade would be able to make the same impact as someone like David Miller did last season.
I would lean in a slightly different direction. I'm not actually probably Miller's number one fan compared to a lot of other people. I am going to go with what I think is a fairly obvious choice of Hardik Pandya, because I just think that he holds this whole team together in terms of balance and leadership. But leadership is in terms of, we talk about him trying to do everything, and he's almost like you're growing up with a really talented young classmate at school who is really good at football, and he's taking the kickoff, the free kicks, the goal kicks, the corners, the penalties, the shots, everything. And I feel like Hardik Pandya is kind of like that in this team. Now, that his presence in the team is also really critical, because he's clearly the fifth bowler in this team. Rahul Tewatia wasn't really trusted with the ball so much last year, and there's that from that perspective. I think he's irreplaceable. The whole balance is completely negated if Hardik Pandya doesn't play, or he's injured and can't bowl, which would potentially be a plausible scenario. So yeah, those are question marks for me in terms of how they would cope with his absence.
Yeah, to me as well, Rashid Khan is a no-brainer because if you look at Gujarat's strategy last season, it was essentially to just keep wickets in hand and bat with a stable mindset. And I think they were only able to do it because they had someone like a Rashid Khan in the 11, who that on more often than not will save those extra 10 runs which any other bowler would have given. So I think Rashid Khan's presence is very important, and not to forget his contributions with the bat at the end of the day. Because in my opinion, Rashid Khan is the best T20 player going around, and I think I don't know what Dan thinks, but if I have to pick one player, if I'm working for a team and I have to pick one player with among all of them, my first pick will definitely be Rashid Khan.
Yeah, it's difficult to disagree with that for sure, Somesh. So obviously, super elite player for a number of years now. So yeah, of course, I agree. But it's interesting that the three of us have all picked different players, and I think that goes in terms of there are three, maybe four if you include Subman Gill as well, players in this team who all I feel have got to have big seasons for them to achieve a successful season as a group. If two or more of them fail, that's a huge issue.
Yep, that goes without saying. So I just have two follow-up questions. In my head, I think framing the Gujarat 11 was the toughest. And not because of the reasons that we discussed about Kolkata and Mumbai. It was more about the availability of options. Like, for example, Dan, your 11 and Gurkirat, yours as well had Sai Kishore. But then that means Yash Dayal misses out, who had an exceptional last season. Uh, of course, if Kane Williamson plays, then Sai Sudarshan misses out. KS Bharat is one guy. Ridhiman Saha, although there are limitations, but he has done justice to his potential every time he has taken field for any side he's played in. So, I mean, do you guys echo those thoughts? The toughest 11 to frame just because of the uh, number of options available.
Yeah, there's 10 combos you could really create here, and the management could probably still pick some other combination or permutation even after that. So yeah, absolutely.
I think it comes down to who the foreigners that they want to play. If you decide on your foreigners, then it becomes slightly easy, because if you have an Alzari Joseph, then you can play without any Yash Dayal and you can play Sai Kishore. And that means that you will not be able to play both of Matthew Wade and Kane Williamson, and someone like a Sai Kishore Sai Sudarshan can come in. And the good thing is, like, they have three wicket keeping options. Two of them are Indian wicket keepers in Saha and KS Bharat. So they've really tried to cover up as many options as it was possible in terms of backups. But what I really didn't understand is that why did they buy someone like Pradeep Sangwan in the last auction and Mohit Sharma in this auction? These buys I really couldn't make sense of. Even Kane Williamson, I do think that there were better batters out there who they could have picked for a number 3 spot. I mean, if they wanted, probably someone like a Joe Root could have been much better, because the pitch in Ahmedabad sometimes can be a little up and down, and Joe Root has played on that wicket a lot more than what probably Williamson has done, and Joe Root also offers another bowling option. So these buys I didn't understand, and sometimes I just feel that teams just go for a reputation a lot more rather than what is actually in front of them, and that can come back to haunt them. Gujarat would hope that it's not the case with them.
I agree with that. And I think that there's an element of just picking known quantities as sort of bench players, if you like, rather than necessarily doing really diligent scouting of the lower levels to try and find the next up and coming superstar. I'm really strong on the fact that not just in this league but worldwide, that I'm really strong on a lot of young players making up the bench, because you get a lot of benefit from one, the theoretical continued improvement in them as they get more experience and become less naive and get more game time, work on their game and get towards peak age. And two, you get retention rights on potentially a really talented young player for not a lot of money, and potentially giving yourself the opportunity of having that player for their entire career. So I don't really understand the logic of picking, someone like a Mohit Sharma, who I think we know where his ceiling is at, and he's never. I think we're the best one in the world. Is very unlikely to be a superstar in this league anytime soon. So for me, pick the players with the highest ceiling with the upside. That's critical for me.
Yeah, I mean, just echoing those thoughts and give one example. I mean, they could have picked someone like a Will Smith ahead of Kane Williamson. not a lot to lose, but a whole lot to gain.
Absolutely.
One more question before we touch upon our predictions of where will they finish is about Hardik's batting position. Now, all of us sort of agree and put Hardik in that number 5 spot, but we saw last season that Hardik was predominantly seeing himself as an anchor and batted above the order as well. But what is the position that you guys prefer? I obviously feel that he should bat at 4, but bat at 5, sorry. But in his head, if he wants to anchor, do you think he should then rather bat at 3 that and put Wade in the lower middle order and push Sai Sudarshan as an opener, which is his natural position for his state side?
This is
See,
where I think. Sorry, go for it. Go for it.
yeah, I I don't mind Hardik batting at 3. Like from Hardik's perspective, it is probably the best thing. But then what that does is it leaves underutilization of at least 2 batters in the 11. If not, or one if you are only going to play with 6 batters. That is my problem, because if Hardik bats at 3, then one of Sai Sudarshan or Vijay Shankar or whosoever is that extra Indian batter that they play, that batter has to do the tougher role, which is to probably arrest the collapse and then try and finish off the innings as well. That I feel is very difficult, whether you are an Abhinav Manohar or a Sai Sudarshan or even a Vijay Shankar, which is why I probably want Hardik to be batting at 4 or 5. Because see, if wickets have fallen early, I mean, what I think teams all over the world need to understand is that if wickets have fallen early, say if you're 3 down in the power play, regardless of the fact that you're a number 5, number 6, or number 7, you have to play anchor for 4 or 5 overs. You can still play anchor, but to start playing anchor even when the situation doesn't demand for it sometimes can be detrimental to your side. So at number 5, Hardik can play anchor if there's a collapse, right? But if there is an Abhinav Manohar at number 4 with Hardik at 5 and Miller at 6 to follow, then Abhinav Manohar has the security. Oh, I have batters to follow after me. I can take my risk and I can go out and sort of express myself, what we call it. So that is what I feel. But if Abhinav Manohar is at 5, Hardik's already been dismissed and they are at 3 down, then it puts a lot of pressure on someone like an Abhinav Manohar who's really not had a lot of experience and who's still developing. So for me, someone like Hardik Pandya should stay at 5 for this reason, because you want to get the best out of a Sai Sudarshan or an Abhinav Manohar or whosoever is the other Indian batter that you want to play.
Yep.
So from
Dan,
my
your
perspective,
thoughts? Yeah.
from my perspective, I don't like the idea of Hardik playing anchor at all. One, I think it's a waste of his talent, and two, I look at this team and I run through these names: Gill, Wade, Williamson, Miller. All of them very capable of chewing up balls at the start of their innings, and being around a runner ball or not far off a runner ball after 15 or 20 deliveries. So you don't need another player who can do that. I mean, Shubman Gill probably is one of the perfect anchor openers in this league. You don't need one of your most talented hitters to come down the order and try and do the same thing. And you've got, if you're going to play Williamson, that's exactly what he's going to do as well in terms of the anchoring and I would be really surprised if he finished the season with anything over 130 strike rate and probably quite a lot lower than that. So Hardik, I think, is a waste of his talents to anchor. We can quibble about whether it's 5 or number 6 for him in this team. I'm not massively a fan of batting positions. I much prefer overs entry points, if that makes sense. I think this is quite situational. Maybe he might, if they want a left-hander at some stage, they might use Miller higher up. If they don't, then they might use Hardik higher up, and I'm fine with them being pretty flexible in that respect.
Yep. Where do you think they'll finish, Dan?
I want to say somewhere like 7th or 8th. But I don't know. I feel like maybe I'm a bit scarred after Tawatia's 6s last season, and I think I just hope that the mean revert and kind of get the amount of wins that I feel like their recruitment justifies, which is why I want to have them about 7th or 8th.
See, for me, I think they are probably going to finish somewhere between 4th to 6th, and it's going to come down to how lucky or unlucky they are. I mean, if they're really unlucky, they could really end up at 6th, 7th. But if they are lucky, they can make it to the top four because they have the quality. Last time around, they also didn't start off the season with Sai Kishore, which I don't think is going to happen now. I think they will play Sai Kishore because they've truly understood what his capability was. I do think that Shubman Gill is a better batter than before. He's going to be conscious of the fact that he needs to start quicker in the power play, and if he does that, his middle over strike rate wasn't a problem. So there's that. I'm not so sure if Tewatia can replicate what he did last season, but Miller's looking good. Rashid is always looking good, and their bowling has enough. And early on, we were discussing about what could be their possible best 11. I was just looking at their squad. They probably have a backup for each spot except for maybe Hardik. Maybe even in fact, you can on paper you can argue that Vijay Shankar is also maybe a backup for Hardik on paper, maybe not in terms of performances. And this is one side that really doesn't need to spend their heads on who the impact player is going to be, because regardless of what combination they play, they are always going to end up with seven bowling options with probably batting till 7, 7, 8. We saw even Alzai Joseph was capable of hitting one or two big hits as it happened in the last game. Shami can do it as well. So uh, they have bases covered on paper. It's going to come down to how much can they perform and how are their resources utilized well. I don't think they did it last season. If they do it this time, they can finish in the top four. But yes, I think that they could be on the wrong side of the results. uh, from when they are in similar situations as when it comes to last season. Last season they won a game where probably against Hyderabad they needed to chase some 23-24 in the last over, and they won. I won't be surprised if this season it is the opposite, that they have to defend 22-23 in the last over, and they concede, because these kind of things can really happen in this format and you never know uh, you know where do you end up. So 4 to 6 is my prediction for them. And yeah, if you finish in top four, then all you need is 3 good days.
Yep, I think for me, I'm pretty sold on their bowling, but not so much on their batting. And if they are sort of adamant of including Williamson in the 11 by hook or by crook, then I actually don't think that they will make it to the top four. Uh, a lot of players there are sort of anchorish, like Dan has pointed out earlier as well. Although I think Shubman Gill will have a really good season. He will be one of my contenders for the orange cap, but as we have seen in the past, that's not always a very good thing for the team per se.
Yeah.
Agree.
Okay, yeah. Moving on. So the team that probably most of our viewers would have been waiting for, and we are talking about Dhoni's men, Chennai. Last year, it did not go as well for them as they would have wanted. They had a change of leadership midway, and the tide sort of turned as soon as Dhoni took the reins again. But they still finished second to last. There was a big gap because of an injury. Deepak Chahar missed the complete season last time around. It had an impact to their performance. But other than that, Dan, based on their recruitments in the auction, do you think they have plugged in the gaps that were there last time around?
Being really honest, I am unconvinced that they've done enough to convince me that things are going to change between last year and this year. The only thing that I think that really gives them hope, in my view, is the fact that there's going to be a consistent captain, and we can rely on potentially some more moments of MS Dhoni genius with this group. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. There's probably, I want to say, 4 or 5 players in this 11 that I wouldn't want to recruit myself, or certainly not pay the the prices that have been paid for them. I think that there's even gaps. I mean, look at the impact players. Probably a weaker group of impact players than most other teams. Now, since I sent this over as a potential starting 11, we're now finding out that Ben Stokes isn't fit to bowl. So essentially, you've got a guy who you spent 16 crore on, who is going to play as a specialist batter, probably will play because he's Ben Stokes, despite the fact that his T20 batting numbers show very little logical, very little logic that he's actually going to be an above average batter at this standard. So that's a big problem. It also means that Shivam Dubey and Moeen Ali are going to have to come up with 4 overs between them, and they're already lacking death pacer. And if they were going to use Stokes in that role, then they can't do that either. So, I mean, the death bowling for me fills me with dread. Where they're going to have to win. They're going to have to win matches in 16 or 17 overs, because bowl teams out in 16 or 17 overs, because the death bowling just isn't there. I mean, I would have no idea how to construct an over distribution for this team.
And that's where maybe Dhoni genius will come in. Yeah, Gurkirat.
For me, their problems begin with Ben Stokes. This might sound very absurd, because for a lot of teams, having a good all-rounder is the solution to most problems. But Chennai always have had all-rounders. If they play Ben Stokes, then they have to drop one of Pretorius or Moeen Ali, because I don't see the sense in dropping Devin Conway, because he's probably their best all-round batter who's good against spin and against pace. So, and again, where does Stokes bat? For me, the top 3 has to be Stokes, Ruturaj, Conway, because I think Conway can still bat at 3. I'm not so sure if Stokes can do that. And then outside of that top 3, their middle order looks very thin. Now, you could have Raidu, you could have Shivam Dubey, you could have Jadeja, and you could have maybe Moeen Ali, or instead of Moeen Ali, you could have Pretorius. Now, all these batters are, off late they have become more of cameo specialists. Ambati Raidu is not, barring that one innings that he had versus Punjab last time, he's not going to give you a season where he's going to average 35 plus. He's not going to give you that. And there is, if you get Conway out, and Stokes you can easily choke this team with pace, with high end pace bowling, back of length pace bowling. If Conway and what if 2 of the top 3 are dismissed early, because everyone then struggles against high end pace bowling. MS Dhoni, the batter, we don't know where he's going to bat, probably number 8. They have depth, but how are they? How is that batting depth on paper going to translate in terms of usage is going to be very important, because all of their middle order, like I said, are mostly cameo specialists against uh, a favorable bowling lineup. None of them are the kind of batters who can do well against all kinds of bowling lineup. Someone like Jadeja can't really be your number 5, number 6 when you are playing matches in Chepauk, because he can easily be tied down with spin bowling. So there's that. Stokes also struggles against spin. So, and then what Dan mentioned, there is no express pacer and there is no potential wrist spinner as well in the first 11, because if you play a wrist spinner in the first 11, you probably have to drop one of Jadeja or one of the Indian paces, which is not going to happen. So there's that. Tikshana will play, so he adds some value in the power play. Their power play bowling is going to be better than what it was last time with Deepak Chahar being there. But then uh, the question is, who do you play amongst Moeen Ali and Pretorius, now that Stokes is not going to bowl? Because if Stokes was going to bowl, then you could have probably played Moeen Ali in Chennai, and outside of Chennai you could have played Pretorius. But now you can't really do that. So their bowling is a concern. So is their middle order. For them to have a good season or for them to be in positions wherein they can win the games, they need one of the top three to always bat deep. Either Conway has to bat deep, or Ruturaj has to bat deep, or Stokes has to bat deep. I don't agree with Stokes being in the middle order because of the issues that I mentioned. And I remember when we were previewing England for the World T20, even Dan had mentioned that Stokes' best position is opening.
Mhm.
So how they get
Yeah.
get the pieces of the puzzles together is very difficult. It's one thing to get it together when you have the resources, but in this case there's obvious lack of resources as well.
This was
Yeah.
almost what I think they're going to do rather than what I agree with you, Gurkirat, is that I think Ben Stokes' best position is to open. Guys, I want to throw out a question as well. Potentially, they've got 5 left-handers in the top six, top seven, and 4 in a row potentially from 4 to 7 in this team. That leaves them open to a lot of exploitation. I think.
Yeah, and
Hmm. Yeah, I mean,
not all of them are good versus spin anyway. Jadeja struggles versus spin, so does Stokes. Conway, like I said, is very. I feel that Conway is indispensable to this lineup because he's the only one who can take on short of length pace bowling. He's very good versus spin. Uh, can play movement decently. Ruturaj is sometimes 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 he's struggling when the ball's moving around. So they there is only one batter. I mean, I don't see how without Conway having a good season, how Chennai can go far in the tournament.
hmm, I actually think one practical way of having this 11 is to have a home 11 and an away 11, where
Yeah,
all the home games Conway plays and all the away games Stokes play. And this gives Stokes ample rest as well. Because, see, Chennai were the worst pace bowling unit last season in terms of economy. That got further exacerbated during the death overs. And that was obvious because they were missing their primary Indian pacer. Uh, so that means that Pretorius has to play, in my opinion. Moeen Ali is a lock. Thiksena is a lock because he's essentially their top and tail bowler. So that leaves room for only Conway and Stokes. And the only practical way to arrange that one more big void that they'll feel is that of Mukesh Chaudhary, who's ruled out due to injury because he sort of improved last season as the tournament uh, uh, went ahead. In my mind, Sumarjeet is the obvious replacement, but I think Dan has gone with Tushar Deshpande. Dan, do you think there is I mean, though they are close, or any particular reason you
Yeah,
would pick Tushar Deshpande ahead of Sumarjeet?
yeah, no, definitely. I think it's certainly a line call. Um, yeah, not much in it at all. It was one of those kind of decisions where you can toss a coin, probably.
Hmm. Yep. Who's that one player that they can't afford to lose?
For me, Jadeja all day long balances the team up. You need the spin, particularly with the home games in Chipawk as well. Probably one of the players you would expect to play a high strike rate innings down the order, win some matches, bring them back from impossible positions. Gun fielder, for me, just brings this complete balance to the team. If he's not fit for some reason, they've really got very little in the way of replacements. They would have to go maybe someone like Nishant Sindhu, who is still 18 years of age, as a kind of a like for like. And I think he's indispensable to this team.
Hmm. Gurkirat, for you?
for me it's Conway, like I said, because like you mentioned, if Stokes is not going to play away games or maybe a set of games, then Conway becomes their only good batter, probably in the top 5 or top 6, who is good against pace, uh, as well as against spin. So he's someone who can bind the innings together. For me, if Conway is injured, then they are in trouble because uh, then a lot of responsibility falls on Ruturaj's shoulders. To and Ruturaj is very good against spin, but I'm not sure if he can do the role that Faf used to do of shielding the lineup against pace. So for me, that is an issue. And Someone like Conway did it very well for New Zealand in that game versus Australia as well, where he played, I think, 17 balls out of 24 by Zampa, because he knew that Zampa could really trouble the remaining batters, and he just took him upon himself to face Zampa and scored runs of it. So for me, Conway is very important for them.
How do you feel
Hmm.
about, let's say Conway was injured? Could they structure up with Stokes opening and bringing in Pretorius as a, say, five or
Pinch
six,
hitter.
like that?
I think if they're not going to play Stokes in a few of the games, it is possible that he may even play as a pinch hitter, because South Africa have used Pretorius in that role when they were playing versus India. In India, they used Pretorius in that role of coming in the power play and pinch hitting against pace. So Pretorius can do that role, but still, you'd still want one batter who's good against all kinds of bowling. If you have Stokes and Ruturaj opening, then if you can easily tie down Stokes with spin, if especially if Ruturaj is dismissed. You can't really tie down Conway like that with spin.
Mm. I sort of disagree with that, because the way I see it is even if they're playing Stokes and Conway isn't in the team, if Ruturaj is dismissed, in walks Moeen Ali, who's as belligerent against spin as Ruturaj Gaikwad. So, in my opinion, the player that cannot lose is Deepak Chahar, because we already saw what happened last season when did not have him. Already out. If you take Deepak Chahar out of the 11, whatever is remaining of this bowling lineup just collapses. I mean, like Dan said, that they'll have to finish games in 17 overs. If Deepak Char is not there, they might as well not go out to ball at all. Just ask the team that just give us the target, we'll try to chase it down.
Yeah, I mean they really struggled with power play wickets last time, so can understand why you say so, and it's the argument really has weight, because else they already don't have Mukesh Chaudhary, so that means they're short of
Yeah,
another Indian pacer, and then they'll have to
yeah.
play probably both Simarjeet and Tushar Deshpande, and Tushar
Hmm.
Deshpande himself is a little high variance, so then it really puts a lot of trouble for them. For that, then they might have to play someone like Pathirana, which means that Tikshana might go out of the 11. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's understandable why you
It,
say
it,
that.
it, 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 it'll have a cascading effect, and the teams would know that there are just 4 overs from Theeksena where they don't have to lose wickets, and they can just have a party for the rest 16. Okay. Moving on, any other angles that you want to touch upon for Chennai?
I I sense that there is going to be a game where uh, MS Dhoni is going to sub himself out, especially when they're batting second. If he feels the pitch is really a difficult one to bat, or the ball's really turning, and he feels he's not in good touch, he's very capable of subbing himself out. He's that smart. So there is going to be that one game where I feel that MS Dhoni, after keeping, is going to sub himself out and probably send in another batter to or use in another batter to just go out, and given how when given how MS Dhoni's luck has been whenever he's taken these courageous calls, it might just be that game wherein the player who's been subbed in actually comes in and gives an impactful performance, and
Mm.
everyone is left in awe of
Yeah.
MS Dhoni's brilliance and captaincy. Not that
That
Mm.
people aren't, but it might just be another feather into his cap.
that
I just
narrative,
think that it's going to happen.
and also I think not only is he smart, but yeah, these things kind of seem to come off more often than not. Or certainly he
Yeah,
gets credit when they do and doesn't get the blame when they don't. But also with him, I think as well, he's a team man, right? If he thinks that him being subbed off is the best decision for this Chennai team, I think he'll do it. Whereas I
yeah,
think a lot of
Mm.
other people won't want to take themselves off as captain because they've got a
yeah.
bit of an
Because see, with other captains, it can also be perceived in a manner, oh, this captain doesn't want to leave with the front, lead from the front, right? You can have all ex cricketers be at the actually, ask for that captain's head, that what kind of a captain is this one who really doesn't want to take the responsibility, etc., etc. But MS Dhoni doesn't have anything like that to prove.
No.
His record
Yeah.
speaks for himself. If MS Dhoni does it, it could also be seen as an inspiration for other captains who are struggling. But if some other
Yeah.
captain does it and the team loses, God forbid, God save that captain from all the outrage and the trolls and the memes on Twitter. But if MS Dhoni does it and it comes off, it would really set a very good precedent for captains who are struggling, because he doesn't have any pressure, he doesn't have anything to prove. So if there's one person who can actually pull it off, it's Dhoni.
Agree.
Yeah, I think there are two players in the globe right now who don't have a baggage of proving that they can lead from the front. One is Dhoni and the other is MS Dhoni, and both. So no vacuum of leaders, quality leadership in that side.
The other is,
Uh,
sorry, the other is, I
are
missed
they
you.
your top four contenders? Stokes, Ben Stokes.
uh, are they my top
Yep.
four
Uh,
contenders? I'd say very similar to probably, I said 4 to 6 for Gujarat. I'd say 4 to 7 for Chennai, because uh, unlike Eden Gardens and Kolkata, uh, Chepauk and Chennai are the best possible combination for as a home venue for any team. There is no other team which I think is that strong, or that has structured their 11 as per the conditions that are there at the venue. Because at Chepauk, Ravindra Jadeja, Tikshana, and Moeen Ali themselves, especially if they are bowling second, they are capable of bowling 10 overs amongst themselves, if not 12. They can really bowl 10 overs amongst themselves. So there is that. And then on that pitch, someone like an Ambati Raidu or Shivam Dubey, these batters don't really have to worry about the ball swinging or the ball bouncing or there being enough pace. They can actually take on spin bowling and do very well. So yeah, I think that Chepauk factor alone, given how well they are suited to that venue, uh, might be a huge factor if they are able to win 6 or even 5 games out of 7 there. Then they can surely win 2 games on the road, and we have seen teams qualify with 14 points for the top four. So for me, how they fare at Chepauk is very important.
hmm. Dan, your thoughts?
Fairly similar. I definitely agree about the Chipotle factor. I think they're going to have to win minimum 5 matches there, if not 6. I'm more skeptical about 14 points qualifying now. It's 4 from 10 rather than 4 from 8. I think that you're going to need to go 8-6 at least to be in the top four. Look, this is a team who I've continuously performs poorly when I'm modelling outcomes for this team over a number of years now, and yet somehow they often seem to miraculously pull these victories out of thin air. Whether it's the Dhoni factor, whether it's something else as well, maybe it's a bit of Chapor in the past and when they were last there. It could all be rolled into one. Um, I tend to have a rule where I kind of I feel like I should work out how many wins I think they're going to get and double it, because that's kind of how it seems to work a lot of the time. But I'm gonna stick with my head here, and I'm gonna have them very similar to Gujarat as well, 7th or 8th.
Hmm. I feel they'll be in contention for top four. Might miss by a whisker or so, but I won't be surprised if they qualify because uh, Stephen Fleming has gone on record to say that we are pretty much a Chennai-based side. So they have no qualms of actually accepting that they build their squad thinking that they have to win most of their home games, and that will be an advantage. Uh, I feel they'll do better than what they did last season, and even last season they were like what, a couple of wins away. So yeah,
No,
there
last
and
season
thereabouts.
I think last season they had 5 wins. Uh, this season, why I said that even teams can qualify with 7 is because Bangalore qualified with 14 points last time.
Yeah,
And Bangalore and Delhi were logged for 14 points. It's just that Delhi were.
yeah.
Bangalore have 16? I'm not sure. Delhi had 14, so Bangalore probably had 16. Yeah.
Punjab had
So
14 as well. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So if they win 5, then they
Yeah,
are in with a chance. If they win 5 at Chepauk, Also, let's just check
Hmm.
which teams are they playing at Chepauk. That will probably give us an idea as well. Just give me a moment. Just checking that out.
Yep. Meanwhile, we can take a few questions. So yeah, Avnish, over to you. Yep. So not Speed Bro is asking who should open with Gill. Yep. I think we've already taken it, but Dan, if you want to reiterate your thoughts.
Yeah, so it's just reiterating. I think that there's a lot of combos. I wouldn't open with Kane. I wouldn't play Kane, but they will. He'll bat three though, I would imagine. I think it's probably going to be a Wade or a Riddiman Saha. Probably would be the two combos most likely.
Hmm. Yeah. Before we take the next question, so Chennai just won 4 games last season, so I don't know what I was thinking when I said that they only needed a few wins. Maybe I just
Yeah.
discounted out all the games they played under Jadeja.
So I've just checked out which teams do they play in Chepauk. So they play Lucknow, they play Rajasthan, they play Sunrisers, they play Punjab, Mumbai, Delhi, and Kolkata. So I do think out of this seven, or out of those 7 games, they should be able to win two, which is Mumbai and Kolkata. What I am concerned about is that how are they going to get across the line against Lucknow, Rajasthan, and Hyderabad. I think that those are really difficult fixtures at those venues, at that venue, because Rajasthan are going to have Chahal and Ashwin, and Lucknow will probably have Bishnoi, Hooda, and one more spinner. It could be Amit Mishra. Amit Mishra has done well at Chepauk, and Hyderabad will have one of Akil Hussain or Adil Rashid, along with maybe Washington Sundar and Adian Makram with his part-time off spin. And then they have, they also play Delhi at that venue, wherein there's Kuldeep and there's Akshar, and maybe who knows, Delhi could bring in someone like a Lalit Yadav. So if they can win 2 out of these 4 games, then maybe, yeah, they can qualify, because these are the games at Chepauk. But these 4 games at Chepauk are are difficult for them in my view.
Hmm. I won't be very concerned about the Hyderabad game, but the other three definitely.
No, but Hyderabad also, because
Yeah.
they'll have Abhishek Sharma, who's done very well against spin. Makram has improved against spin,
Hmm.
and Washington Sundar knows
Yeah.
that venue very well. And yeah, I mean, I maybe, and their overseas Hyderabad. This is something we have discussed earlier. All overseas batters of Hyderabad actually play spin well, whether it's Makram, whether it's
Hmm.
Brook, whether it's Phillips, or whether it's Klassen. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be difficult.
Hmm. Our Earth is Best is asking where will bat. I think we've touched upon it in a fair detail. So maybe you can just go and uh, replay slightly earlier in this video where we start talking about Chennai. We've touched upon this. Yep. Yep. Gurkirat, if you can read out the comment, it's slightly far
It's
off from me. Yeah.
The outcast says, although CSK do really well at Chepauk, but don't you think the opponent will be better prepared this time about what to expect? And even the impact rule allows team to play extra spinner. It's a very good
Um,
question.
yeah, great question. Really happy to discuss this. I think that the outcast makes a really good point, but I also think it's a rather idealistic approach in terms of look, we know we're sitting here now, we're talking about Chippewa. The outcast has asked this question, he clearly knows about Chippewa. However, if you go back and look at the last year or two of matches which were played in Chippewa, CSK, the Chennai team, consistently bowled a lot more spin than the opposition. So the opposition teams were going there with two spinners. Chennai were consistently having three plus spin options, consistently bowling more spin overs. and the opposition didn't adjust to the check-out factor as much as they should have. Now, with impact subs, that could potentially change. Teams could structure up differently. But I think one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of supporters and fans of T20 cricket make is that they overestimate the efficiency of the decision making of teams. And it wouldn't shock me at all if the checkout factor was a big factor again for the success of Chennai. And I'm happy to have a look at this throughout the season. I would be amazed if the opposition bowled more spin there than Chennai if the pitches were conducive to doing so.
And I mean, in my opinion, throwing spin the pace which is more suited for that particular wicket, and also the angle which is basically the key part of Dhoni's captaincy. So there is more at play than just deploying as many opposition spinners, as many spinners
There,
as the
there,
opposition is doing.
there's also one other factor. Pretorius is not Dwayne Bravo. He might become Dwayne Bravo, but he
Yet,
doesn't have the
yet,
experience
yeah.
of of playing at Chepauk which Dwayne Bravo had. So Dwayne Bravo was very good in terms of exploiting the slowness of the pitch at Chepauk with his cutters and the angles you mentioned. He could just come around the wicket, two right-handers, and just choke them out with those wide yorkers. I've not seen that tactic employed by Pretorius as much.
Hmm. Yep, Avnish, do you have anything else? Dan, what does your data say?
So,
A lot of people were excited about him last season as well, but yeah,
yeah, sorry, I couldn't quite hear.
about Hunger Gaker, yeah.
Yeah, I can see the question now. Look, it's an interesting one because when I watched the under-19 World Cup, he looked like a player who actually could hit as well. However, in his sort of first class list A and T20 matches for Maharashtra, there's really been no evidence of him being a competent batter whatsoever. High score of 17 in 25 matches across those formats. So that's quite a surprise. I think that ultimately he was going to be a bowler who can bat. Maybe he would bat like number 10 in this team behind Deepak Chahar. Um, I want to see him get opportunities, but it's maybe a bit harsh and a bit controversial to say this, but I think he's at the wrong franchise to get opportunities because they don't tend to play young players very often.
Hmm.
This is something that I agree with Dan. Even Sai Kishore at Chennai hardly got any games. We've seen. I don't think Hungrekar will get a lot of games this season. There's been someone like Prashant Solanki who's been in and out around the team who didn't really get a lot of games. Neither did Jagdishan. It's only Ruturaj who's gotten games, and that too after Chennai were ruled out of the 2020 competition, and then there was no Watson. So very difficult. It it's a it's it's a very peculiar franchise for a team to be for a youngster to be in, because on one hand there's obviously the experience of MS Dhoni to learn from, but and the learnings that you get while being in that environment is something that I don't think you can get anywhere. But at this at the same point, you really don't get a lot of games with the franchise, so your development in terms of cricketing skills may not happen as soon as what would happen in some other franchise. So there's both the good and bad of being a youngster and being in that franchise. I think Somesh's net is frozen. Somesh, can you hear us? I don't think he can. Anyway, it's been over an hour, and now we are done with the previews. If you've enjoyed this, please do like this video and share all of our content with all the cricketing nerds out there, whether they are your friends or family. Don't forget to subscribe to the cricket.com channel. From tomorrow onwards, we start the watch alongs along with the games. Do tune in. It's a lot more fun. There's not just cricketing conversations. There are a lot of false accusations sometimes. There's a little bit of banter and a lot more fun. So do join that. In case you've missed out on the previews of any other teams, you can check out our YouTube channel. We have posted clips separately as well, and you can always go back and look at all the previous 4 episodes. So there's that. And the times there: Gujarat versus Chennai, watch along at 7:20 p.m. tomorrow. So do tune in. On that note, I'd like to thank Dan for this show, and for tuning in and giving us his time. Uh, Special thanks to Somesh as well, who will be there tomorrow during the watch along, as would be me, and in the future watch along. So on this note, a very goodbye to all of you for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and don't forget to press the like button and the subscribe button. Thank you so much. Goodbye.